Hello there, third grade. We're going to go ahead and talk about our spelling lesson today. Our target is I can compare and contrast the plot, which is the sequence of events of written stories by the same author. So we are going to do that today in your assignment. You're going to be reading two different stories in the same series and comparing them, meaning you are going to see what is the same and what is the difference. And you're going to be looking at the setting and the plot today. So in today's lesson, we went ahead and we talked about our plot structure, and we reviewed what Plot Mountain is and why we need to know it. So most fictional stories will follow the same plot structure. So we talked about how our Magic Treehouse series is one of those stories. And it is sometimes referred to the Story Mountain or the Plot Mountain. Either way, it's a way for us to organize our thoughts when we're thinking about a story. And it's important to know the plot structure because you really need to know where the important parts are in the story, so you can make sure you are comprehending that story to the best of your ability. Knowing that if you don't pick up on the conflict, the main problem in the beginning of the book, you may need to go back and reread it. And rereading is something that great and strong readers do, because we don't always, when we're reading something, and this ties into our health lesson we did today, when we read something for the first time, that could be very new information. And so when we're creating pathways along our neurons, it's probably a little weak and not strong enough. We might need to go back and reread and make it a little bit stronger so our understanding gets better. So that's what we want to make sure we're doing as readers. As writers, if we were developing a fictional story, which you will be doing at the end of our Magic Treehouse unit, you're going to be creating your own Magic Treehouse book. So you need to be thinking about the plot structure. And as a writer and as an author, you need to know where to put your introduction, where to put your conflict and problem, and where would you put your climax, which is the most exciting part of the story, and how do you trickle down to your resolution, which is the solution to your problems. So we went ahead and reviewed all of these. We know that the introduction is where we meet our characters, and we typically like to do a character analysis. We get to know our characters very well in the beginning because the author wants us to really care about them and maybe even have us make connections to our real life and real people that we know, depending on if they're people in the story. Sometimes our fictional stories might be animals that act a lot like humans. Either way, the author wants you to connect to your characters and this setting. And so in our new Magic Treehouse novel, we did that in the beginning. We talked about Jack and Annie, and we compared them to the last novel. And we also we talked about the setting. We're introduced to our new setting, which is the Middle Ages, aka medieval times. So that's the big conflict, is that Annie wanted to go to the medieval times. Jack did not. And Annie runs away from him and goes into the castle, and Jack is just running after her. We were in the Rising action when they went into the castle. Jack was spotted by one of the knights. Then they went into the great hall where the great feast was, and they were in awe by just the culture of the Middle Ages and how different it was compared to their time. And so there is where a servant boy spotted them. That's all the Rising action. It's building tension. We're almost to the climax, where when we left off in our reading, we are there. Jack and Annie get captured because they were in the armory and they were trying to run away and hide, but Jack ended up crashing into all of the armor and weapons. And so they get captured and taken to the dungeon, where they want to chain them up and even possibly hang them the next morning, which is awful. I definitely am happy I don't live in the Middle Ages. How about you? So we are still in the climax. We're going to be falling down here soon because Jack and Annie just ran away. Remember, Annie pulled out a flashlight and was like, ta-da! And she scared all those guards. They're scared because this takes place in the Middle Ages, and technology like that doesn't even exist yet. So they were frightened by her. They think she's some magical, mystical wizard. Anyway, we're going to be falling down in action here soon in our story. And I'm hoping, that we find out more about that medallion. Maybe we'll get some answers about that. And then we're going to probably at the end of the plot, at the end of the falling action, we might get the author's going to set us up for the third book, because we know that the Magic Tree House is a series of books. And so mostly in the resolution area, Miss Mary Osborne there, she is setting us up for her next book. So what we're going to do now is we're going to watch a video on these plot elements from Flocabulary, and it's going to help us remember the key elements of plot structure, and then we're going to jump into our assignment.
A plot's not anything but a sequence of events. And every story has a plot, because a story without a plot is like a fish out of water. Or like pancakes without syrup. Or like a shoe without some laces. You wouldn't wear shoes without laces, would you? Would you? You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier, the climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup, that's the conclusion. Make your plot hot, and you never losing. Let's take a second now to focus on plot. You want to learn to tell a cool story or not? The beginning of the story is the introduction. We get to meet the characters, find out something about the main conflict or main problem. We're dying to know how the characters will solve them. The conflict unravels in 3 phases. Rising action is the first stage. It's the middle of the story where you build suspense. Whatever the problem is, it gets intense until the turning point hits. That's called the climax. The character changes, accepts new facts, and may have to make a choice based on what happened. The tension decreases. That's the falling action with the conflict resolved. You can wrap the loose end in the last section that we call the conclusion. You got a story to tell. You better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier. The climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup. That's the conclusion. Make your plot hot, and you never losing. Let's break down the plot of a story called The Date, with 2 characters who are not the same. In the introduction, Joe says he's not popular. That's an important fact about his character. The conflict, he wants to date a popular girl. Her name is Lisa, and she's out of this world. She only dates jocks, but he still makes the offer when he asks Lisa out on a date to Red Lobster. She says yes, and the plot thickens. The rising action adds a little tension, but then Joe is grossed out by the way she chooses the climax. That information is new. It's a turning point for Joe, and things change after. Their relationship ending is the falling action. So the resolution to this conflict or conclusion is Joe and Lisa didn't stick. You got a story to tell. You better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier. The climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup. That's the conclusion. Make your plot hot, and you never losing.
Conclusion is another vocabulary word for resolution or solution. And you need to make sure that if you're telling a story as a writer, that you have one of those. So now, when we're thinking about the climax, we need to realize that that is also a turning point. In our last novel, we said that that was a turning point for Jack. He really changed a lot at the end of that book. That experience with the Pteranodon and the T-Rex really softened him up a bit, especially towards his sister. And he grew to have a more appreciation for his little sister, because she really came through for him. And we just finished, we're in the middle of our climax in our second book. And if I was to compare and contrast those two, I would say that they're very similar in that way because Annie came through for Jack again. She pretended that flashlight was a magical wand, and the guards from the Middle Ages believed her because they went back in time and nothing like that existed yet. She came through for him again. And that is part of the plot. It seems like Annie is always saving Jack. That's how those two plots are similar. It also makes me think as a reader, will this be a turning point for Jack or Annie this time? Maybe Annie might be the one that's changed a little bit after this climax. Who knows? So I can't wait to find out. We're going to move on to our assignment today, and your assignment's going to look a little bit like this. And you're going to have to read 2 stories from the same series. Your story is going to involve this character here, Al, Wise Al. Now, this isn't the same one you're going to be doing, but this is going to be similar. So up here, you're going to notice in your Schoology assignment, you see the blue here? Those are your sentence stems. Use those sentence stems to help you compare and contrast the setting and plot of your 2 stories. This is an example. So here is a series about a wise owl. And in the first story here, if you read it, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to read the first story and you're going to read the second story. Remember, mine on the screen right now is going to be different than yours. You're not. Otherwise, you would be doing the same assignment as this, and your brain wouldn't have the opportunity to really, really exercise and pick up the skill that I want you to pick up. But I want you to know that the blue up there, those blue sentences are your sentence stems. So when it comes time to do your assignment, make sure you're using them. So this is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to read each story, and then you're going to think to yourself, how is the setting alike or different? And I'm going to say a sentence like this. The settings are alike because, or I may say the settings are different because. I'm going to do the same thing for the plot. The plots are alike because, and the plots are different because. So I want to analyze these 2 stories and see how they're alike and different. When you're comparing and contrasting, you're looking at what's similar and what's different. So Wise Owl sat perched in a tree in the dark of night in the forest. He could hear the buzzing of insects all around him. A baby owl came and rested on his branch and asked Wise Owl to teach him how to hunt. So it seems like this series is about Wise Owl. This main character is Wise Owl. Wise Owl did not want to be disturbed. However, he decided he would take the new owl with him and teach him the skills of hunting. So here we have a story about a wise old owl who made a friend. Let's see what book 2 is all about. So in book 2 of the series, you still have the main character, Wise Owl, but it looks like their setting is changing a little bit. Let's read on. Wise Owl decided he wanted to go to the city. He flew overhead and heard a loud buzz below. Everything looked dark and a shade of gray. Wise Owl decided he wanted to try to make friends in the city. And he found a nearby tree with an owl. The owl replied, no visitors were allowed in this tree. Wise Owl decided he did not want to make friends in the city anymore. So, how is the setting different? The setting is different, or like, in many ways. The setting is different because in the first book, it takes place in a dark forest with buzzing insects. In the second book, it takes place in a loud city with loud buzzing car sounds. They're both kind of dark. They're alike in that way. They're both dark, gloomy settings. And there is a tree in both settings. So that is how they are alike and different. So the settings are alike / different because in book 1, there was a dark forest buzzing with insects and a tree. And in book 2, they were in a city with loud buzzing car noises. It was still dark, and there was also a tree in there. Now, how is the plot different? Well, Old Owl, he teaches a baby owl how to hunt in the first book and made a friend with him. Seems like Wise Owl likes to make friends, because in the second book, he tries to make friends in the city, but he had no luck. So I wonder if in book 3 he has any luck with making friends in the next story. But in both books, he wants to make friends, or he ends up making a friend in the first one, but in the second one, not so much. So that could be how they are different. And they are very different stories, but they follow the same plot structure. Now, let's take a look at why we should know. Why should we know this? Why should we know why should we compare and contrast settings and plots of series? So a setting, we know, we talked a lot about this, a setting brings deeper understanding of how the main characters in a series may act differently. And the setting may make you as a reader feel different moods, and it really makes you connect and stay engaged, but so does a plot. Now, knowing all about the plot can help you identify how the story unfolds. It deepens your understanding, your comprehension. And if you think you have a problem understanding a book, you may be having a problem with the plot. And we're talking about fictional stories, not nonfiction. So you may need to reread it, or you may need to try another book that is more your size, your fit. Remember, books fit us like a good pair of shoes. We don't want them too big or too tight. We want them just right. So make sure you have a book that is just right for you when you are picking books to read, and you know that you are looking for those key things like the conflict and the climax and how important they are to the story. You're going to go ahead and give this a go on Schoology. This is going to be your assignment. You're going to read book 5 and 6 of the series Wise Owl, and you're going to tell me how they are alike and how they are different. All right, I'm going to let you get to it, and I can't wait to see what you have to offer.